So let's take a look at the traditional Java development, what we as Java developers we used to do before the arrival of containers. So typically and traditionally, Java developers are used to package their application as jar and var files, and we used to deploy them onto application servers. We used to do it either using our build tools like Maven or Gradle, or we could also do it from our IDE to do most of our work. Uh, um, but in 2013, Docker was created. It was launched, and Docker introduced us to the concept of containers. Applications could now be packaged into containers, which allowed them to be isolated from each other, hence providing us more control, more traffic flow and management. So, which was really cool. But as the applications grow to span over multiple containers deployed across multiple servers, it becomes a bit difficult to manage them with Docker. So this is where Kubernetes came into place. It was founded in 2014, and it allows you to run Docker containers and helps you to tackle the complexities when it comes to running uh, multiple containers across multiple servers. So let's take a look at how the Java developers workflow changed after the introduction of Docker and Kubernetes. Earlier, we as Java developers, we used to package our application into Java files, but now we have to do that as well. And apart from that, we have to containerize our application into Docker images. We have to push that Docker image to some Docker registry. It can be either public or private registry, and for creating the Docker image, we have to write the Docker configuration files called Docker files. And dealing with Kubernetes, we have to write Kubernetes configuration files that can be YAML or JSON. YAML is more popular format for writing these files, and we have to apply those onto Kubernetes cluster. So you can see here that uh, uh, with the introduction of Docker and Kubernetes, we have some additional workflows that are not really a part of our core job. We as developers, we want to focus on our code. We are already filled with lots of backlogs and we countless disruptions. So we want to focus on code more, and we don't want to be debugging Docker files and uh, YAML manifests to see what's wrong. So uh, this is quite painful if you're not really familiar with these tools, and it's really worth learning about Docker and Kubernetes if you have time, but we all don't have that much time as always. So this talk is going to give you an overview about Eclipse JKube, which is a collection of plugins and libraries aimed at making Java developers' experience better on top of Kubernetes when it comes to deploying, managing, building microservices. So it's the successor to famous Fabricate Maven plugin. In case you might have heard about the Fabricate Maven plugin, you might already be familiar with the JKube's workflow. So right now it's offering three components. We have this JKube kit. It's a standalone library that can be used for creating Docker images and generating manifests. And we have these right now. We are offering these two Maven plugins. There's this Kubernetes Maven plugin and OpenShift Maven plugin. Kubernetes Maven plugin is the Maven plugin you can use for working with Kubernetes. It's really helpful in automating some of your workflows when working on top of Kubernetes. And we have this OpenShift Maven plugin, which is just the extension of Kubernetes Maven plugin, but it's specialized. It's more focused towards Red Hat OpenShift container platform, and provides some additional functionality which is specific to Red Hat OpenShift. So you might be wondering, why you should be using Eclipse JKube. These days, there are lots of tools out there that help you to achieve the same task. They help you to deploy application to Kubernetes. They help you to automatically generate your manifest. So what makes JKube so special? So here is our take on that. Here is our counter argument. So Eclipse JKube is a good fit for Java developers because as Java developers, we are used to deploy our application to application servers with our build tools. So, for example, when you're using Spring Boot application, you deploy your application using Spring Boot run. For Quarkus, you use Quarkus dev. For Jetty, you use Ambient Jetty run. So, JKube makes Kubernetes looks like an application server. So, deployment to Kubernetes would be as simple as simply writing ambient k-test deploy, provided that you bind the executions of all the goals. So this is also pretty nice that it makes the deployment to Kubernetes look like deploying to any kind of application server. Second point is that we don't so JKube right now relies on Docker and Kubernetes REST APIs to do most of their work. We are not dependent on any kind of CLI. If you see, Docker, Kubernetes are written in Golang, and all the helper tooling that is around these frameworks, they are also written in Golang. So if you have to use it, you would need to download the binaries and you would need to run them, which is not really the ideal Java way. So JKube, in order to use JKube, you would only need Maven to be installed, and you have to just it. So using JKube would be as simple as installing the plugin into your Power.xml. So third point is JKube helps the Java developers to work with Docker Kubernetes without leaving their traditional Java workflow. So as Java developers, we are used to package publishing to some Maven repository, these kind of things, and JKube can help you achieve the same thing by moving it to the cloud. So you can simply configure the plugin to be activated on various phases, like package phase or build phase, package phase or install phase, or we can create a release profile. You can, like, you release your project, you can have release profile to release it to some container registry. So it really helps Java developers to uh, work with Docker Kubernetes, and without having them realize that they are really slowly moving towards the cloud. Right now, we have these two Maven plugins. Kubernetes Maven plugin, which is specialized for Kubernetes. It should be able to, you should be able to work with any kind of Kubernetes distribution, whether it's Azure, GKE, or any other distribution, and OpenShift as well, which provides container images built through the Docker build strategy and chip build strategy. And we have this additional OpenShift Maven plugin, which is specialized towards OpenShift container platform. And if you are an OpenShift user, you might want to try this out. And since it provides an additional OpenShift specific S2I build strategy, which is also quite helpful. So let's take a look at how JKube tries to help Java developer and uh, in working smoothly on top of Docker and Kubernetes. If you see, earlier Java developers had to write Docker files for themselves. They had to create the Docker image by running Docker CLI, Docker commands, and they have to push the image to Docker registry. You see, all of these things are being replaced by by Kubernetes Maven plugin goals. So pushing to the building a Docker image is simply as running this goal ambient k-test build. Pushing the Docker image is as simple as pushing the image to some registry by ambient k-test push. Generating the manifest for Kubernetes is as simple as doing ambient k-test resource, and applying those manifests to the cluster is as simple as running ambient k-test apply. So if you see, JKube is right now acting as a bridge between Java developer and Docker and Kubernetes, and it really helps a lot in abstracting out lots of the details. So a Java developer has to only think that he's only packaging his application, and JKube does the work behind the scenes for you. So let's take a look at the goals. We are going to take a look at Kubernetes main plugin, and let's take a look at all of the goals and their overview. So we have this build goal, which allows you to containerize your application into a container image, and we have this push goal, which allows you to push the container image to some container registry. It can be either public or private registry. We have this resource goal that allows you to generate Kubernetes YAML manifests. We have this apply goal, which allows to apply the manifest on top of Kubernetes cluster. We have this log goal, which allows you to check logs of your application which is running inside Kubernetes. We have this debug goal that allows you to debug the application which is running inside Kubernetes. And we have this watch goal which allows to automatically rebuild your Docker images and restart containers in case of updates. And we also have a goal for Helm. These days Helm is becoming a de facto package manager for Kubernetes. So we also have a goal for Helm to generate Helm charts. And we have these undeploy goals. Undeploy goals simply cleans up whatever was created during the apply phase, and deploy goal simply forks the install goal and it generates the Kubernetes manifest and applies them. All right, so let's take a look at the modes provided by the Kubernetes plugin. So right now we have zero configuration mode for all of these frameworks: Spring Boot, Quarkus, Vertex, Micronaut, OpenLiberty. So what by zero configuration, I mean that by just adding the plugin to your pom.xml, you should be able to deploy your application to Kubernetes without providing any kind of configuration. So right now, JKube checks the the project dependencies, project plugins, what plugins are used, and according to that, JKube makes some opinionated defaults, and it creates the Docker image and manifests for you. So it's really helpful when you don't know much about plugin, and it's really helpful in getting started quickly. Uh, but this zero configuration mode might not work for all, and we might want to tune the plugins output according to our needs. So we also provide a rich set of configuration options. You can configure the plugin through the XML configuration. You can provide an XML configuration just like any other Maven plugin uh, to specify what kind of image you want to generate, what image you want to have, what additional files you want to add to your image, things like that. And you can also add, you can also edit what kind of Kubernetes manifest you want to generate, and if you want to tweak certain things in the manifest, I mean certain advanced levels configurations. So uh, we have the XML configuration, and we have the resource fragment configuration as well. By resource fragment, I mean you can provide your own Docker file, you can provide your own Kubernetes YAML manifests to JKube, and JKube is going to pick them. And so, for example, in case of Docker files, you provide your own Docker files, place it in the project's root directory, and JKube is going to build the container image according to the Docker file provided. And for Kubernetes manifests, JKube is going to pick those manifests and is going to merge them into the final generated manifests. We'll see all this in action, so you don't have to worry about it. All right, so this is just an example of the XML configuration. So right now, if you see, we are providing the image as XML configuration. This is for the container image that would be building. So this is the name of the image, now the alias, and what's the base image. It's going to be on latest version of OpenJDK. And as the CMD, the entry point of the container, it's we are just executing the jar. All right, so this is, so I didn't share the example for the resource fragment because it was taking all over the slide. So I'm just going to tell how they work. So we can, for Kubernetes resource fragments, you can provide the YAML fragments, not complete YAML, just partial YAML, which things we want to change in the source main JKube directory, or or any other resource directory that can be changed by the configuration. And these YAML fragments are going to be picked, and they are going to be merged in the final generated manifest during the resource generation phase. We also have.
Shubham, sorry to interrupt you. Would you have by any chance an example of the resource fragment as another example you can use to explain the idea, if you're comfortable doing it?
Okay, let me go out of the share screen. I mean slides.
Share your
So
entire, yeah, you can just move on to the next wherever you have, because I'm sure it'll be easier for you to explain the resource fragment as with an example, if it's possible.
yeah, yeah. So let me show you an example. So
Yeah.
if you go to work repos on JKube, Quick starts. Uh, so you see, this is a Maven project, and you can see that you can provide your own YAML files in the source main JKube directory, and these YAML files don't even have to be complete YAML files. They just have to be partial YAML fragments. For example, I want to uh, configure the output of deployment, which is a very basic Kubernetes resource, controller Kubernetes resource that allows us to control the number of pods. And I want to add certain volume here, and I want to add an additional container, and I'm tweaking the what volume mount is going to be here, and I'm also adding the environment. So you can provide a partial fragment, and you can place it in source main JKube directory, and the plugin is going to pick it up, and it's going to uh, when you do ambient k-test resource, it's going to merge this into the final generated artifacts.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
see that a bit later. Just want to give
Okay.
the audience a background of what the Gate resource file looks like. So we can go back to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, continue. Okay. Yeah, yeah, don't worry. I'm sorry, it's a bit boring right now, but I have only few slides left, and then I'll jump to the demo. I'm really hoping that it would be a bit clear when I show the stuff to you. Okay, so I just showed you how the resource fragments you can provide your own YAML manifests, which would be picked by the plugin, and they can be applied directly, and or if they are partial, they will be merged into the final generated manifests. We also have the raw Docker file mode, in which you just place the Docker file in the project root directory, and JKube is going to build a Docker image for you according to that Docker file. Okay, so now we are at the demo part. So my demo is divided into two portions. First is the standard manual ways. I'm going to do all of the stuff. I'm going to simply bootstrap an application from start.spring.io, and I'm going to write a Docker file for that manually. I'm going to push the image using Docker manually. I'm going to write Kubernetes YAML manifest manually, and then I'm going to deploy the application to Kubernetes. So I'm going to do all that manually for the first part, and after that, I'll use JKube to do all of these things, just to demonstrate how easy JKube makes things for you as a Java developer. So let me go back to my browser. Uh, I'll go to start.spring.io, and I'll generate a Maven project with group ID in .bangalore jug, and the artifact ID would be meetup app, and okay, everything looks good. And I'll add a Spring Web dependency, since we are going to develop a web application. All right. Okay, so it looks good. Let me just generate it. Okay, save. All right, so let me go to my browser. Wait. Downloads. Let me go to the. So let me just do a quick compilation. Um, okay. Uh, it's
It'll take a bit of time, not an issue. When you're doing
okay.
live code, demos always come with a with the benefits of the demo code.
Okay. Let me open this in my IntelliJ. I'll just add something to showcase, just a simple controller. Then we'll try to build Docker file, create Docker image, all those stuff. I think most of you might already be familiar with all of that, so it won't be that much difficult for you. But I'll try to keep it
Yeah,
as
while we
simple
are
as
waiting
possible.
for this to let it open up, let's take a few questions from the audience. Is that fine with you, Rohan?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm perfectly fine.
yeah. So what happens here is, so there was a question from Sudhakar that I understand that JKube has Maven plugins, but has it anything for the Gradle build system at the moment?
At the moment, we don't have it. So we are always asked about Gradle support, and we are looking to deliver Gradle support in upcoming 1.3.0 versions. So right now, I'm sorry, we don't have support for Gradle,
That's
but we
fine. Yeah, at
are.
least you're considering it, so not an issue.
Yeah, so earlier this project was called Fabricate Maven plugin. So everything we had was in bundle tightly coupled with Maven. We created JKube and we moved all the core part to JKube Kit, which is a standalone library. And now the plugins are just wrappers around the Kit JKube Kit library. So it's less challenging to create Gradle plugins now, and we are really looking forward to provide Gradle plugins. And we definitely understand that they are really critical since people are there are lots of Gradle users as well, and I hope that we will be able to deliver it by the end of summer. So if everything goes okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's the product development always takes time. So it's the important thing is it's there in the roadmap and it will get delivered sometime in the
Okay.
future. Okay, so yeah, we can go back to our demo.
All right. So so the application seems to have loaded, and okay, this is the driver class of this application. Let me just add a simple controller uh, for to demo, and I'll just add a simple greeting controller. Okay, and it's going to be a REST controller. Uh, all right, and in that I'll simply add a get mapping for uh, root path, and it's gonna produce application JSON and public greeting message greet. Okay, let me just create this greeting message Bojo. String message equals. Let me. I think this. Let me just generate get answer status too. Okay. All right. So application seems to be fine. Let's try to run it. I'm just going to build a jar, and I'm just going to execute it.
Yeah, not a problem. So thanks, Mark, for sharing the GitHub issue, which is if anybody's interested, they can track the GitHub issue, which is provide Gradle equivalents of the existing Maven plugins. That's part of the Eclipse JKube issues. It's been shared with the audience. You can have a look at it.
Okay. So I'm going to execute the jar now, and let's see whether the application comes up or not. Okay, it's just the standard stuff. So, oops,
You
messages.
missed the message. You missed adding something in
Okay,
the message.
okay, sorry.
No issues, no issues. It happens. The fact that you're doing live coding itself is good enough.
Okay, it's really trivial application, so it's
Yeah, absolutely. See, the important thing is you're trying to help the audience understand how JQ helps developers. So I think they need a bit of context around. It's not an issue.
okay.
There are a couple of interesting questions. I'll probably take to them once you are done with this demo. We'll take it one step at a time.
All right. Uh, okay, now it seems to be working fine. So now our application is running fine, and now we want to containerize the application. So we'll start by making a Docker image and publishing it to a Docker registry. So for creating a Docker image, I'll be writing a Docker file. So let me write it then. It would be based on OpenJDK 11, and I'll just add the jar file to the containers deployments folder, and I'm going to expose 8080 port, and I'm going to use uh, I'm just going to execute the jar as the final entry point. Uh, Let me just copy the jar name. Uh, okay, so our Docker file is ready. Let's try to build a Docker image. Docker build with name meetup app with tag 0.0 to 1 snapshot, and I'm providing the permissions to the Docker image. Okay. All right. So our image is built. Let's try to run it. Uh, Okay, it seems to be running fine, just like the jar. So now that we have created Docker image, let's try to publish this Docker image to some container registry. I'll be using Docker Hub since it's the most famous one. So I'll just do the login first. I think I might already have logged in. So you need to log into the Docker Hub, and then you should be able to push the application. So right now our image is not in the Docker Hub user format, so we need to add the Docker Hub username. And so my Docker Hub username is this, so I will need to retag my image to as per the Docker Hub username. So I'll just tag the image Docker tag. uh, okay, Docker.io, my username meetup app. Okay, so okay, sorry, let's check the images again. Okay, so it was tagged. So let's try to push the image. um, all right, so it's now pushing the image to Docker Hub. uh, so uh, okay, let me open my Docker Hub. All right, so seems like the image is pushed. So if I check my Docker Hub, image should have been pushed here. Okay, so the meetup app was pushed few seconds ago, and we pushed the 0.0.1 snapshot. So the part one of demo is done. We successfully containerized the application, and we pushed it to a container registry, which is Docker Hub in this case. So now that our application image has been built, let's try to deploy this application to Kubernetes. And for that, we would be writing the Kubernetes YAML manifests manually. So I'll just create a simple directory called KTest, and I'll write two Kubernetes manifests. First is deployment, second is service, and let's try to write them. So in Kubernetes, pod is the basic unit of execution. So a pod is a set of one or more containers, one or more Docker containers. So you don't use pod directly. You use some kind of controller resource that manages those pods, so that you can have uh, n number of replicas as per your needs. So deployment is one of those controller resources, and it's by far the most popular one. So let's take a look into that. Let's write it. You don't have to worry about the details, because people don't usually write these things manually. I'm just trying to do it for the sake of demo. And its meetup, its name would be meetup app, and its spec would have one replica, and all the pods created from the deployment would have this label. So in Kubernetes, uh, we have a concept of labels, which is for used for grouping the grouping a certain pods. So in case you want to group a pods that are owned by a certain deployment, you would search for all the pods that have this label with key value pair app meetup app. So it's really helpful in grouping stuff, and this is what we are doing here. So this selector thing is the all the pods that are created under the deployment would have this label, and this all these pods that are going to be created would would have a certain kind of template. They would have this body whose metadata would have these labels, and they would have this spec, and they would have just one container image. We are going to paste it later, and its image pull policy would be if not present, and its name would be meetup app, and it would have one port, and its container port 8080. Its name would be, let's say, HTTP, and the protocol would be TCP. All right, so the deployment manifest has been written. Oh, what happened? Okay, so deployment manifest seems to have been written. So now so this is going to deploy the application. It's going to create one pod. We specified one replica, so it's going to create one pod for the application. And let's just try to paste the image here. So our image tags, I'll just copy it from here and I'll paste it here. All right. Okay, so it's so our deployment manifest seems to be complete. So this is going to deploy the application to Kubernetes cluster, but in order to expose our application to either outside world or either other applications which are running inside Kubernetes, we would need to write a service. So let's write it. So a service is a way to expose application on a set of pods as a network service, and we so service tries to expose a group of pods which are marked by a key value pair. So uh, let me just quickly write it. It's a short one. It's metadata. It would have these labels. Sorry, and it would have name, meetup app, and the spec is going. It would have one port with name HTTP and port 8080, protocol TCP, and target port 8080. And it's going to select all the pods that have this label app meetup app. Okay, and it's going to be of type node port. So right now services have different types. A node port type service exposes the service port on the node's IP. So Kubernetes uh, is designed to have one or more nodes. So yes, node port type service is going to expose the service on that specified node's IP. So you can access the service through node IP colon the node port that's created. So you don't have to worry about this for now. You see this in action when I create these manifests and try to access the application. So our manifests are done, and we should be able to deploy the application to Kubernetes. So for deployment, I'll be using Minikube. It's a really helpful project for starting a local single node Kubernetes cluster. So let me just start it. it's taking some time. Alright, so it's preparing Kubernetes with version 1.20.2, which is based on the Docker version of 20.10.2. It's basically running Docker host inside with this specified version, and it Minikube does all that in a VM. These days, Minikube also supports Docker driver, which simply runs Kubernetes inside a Docker container, which is also quite nice. But I'm using KVM too for the VM driver. Okay, so my Kubernetes cluster is running. So let me just check whether everything is okay with some basic commands. Kubectl cluster info. Master is running at this, and okay, kubectl get pods. Okay, so now that Kubernetes cluster is running, let's try to apply those generated manifests to Kubernetes cluster. So I'll use the kubectl apply command. Okay, it is deployment.yaml kubectl apply fqts service.yaml. Okay, let me check whether any pod was created or not. Okay, it was created and it's running as well. Let me check the logs of application. uh, all right, it seems to be running fine. And let's try to access this application. Since we created the service with the type node port, it exposes a IP on the node's IP. So currently my node's IP is this, so I should be able to access my application. I hope it works. All right, so now I'm able to access my application, and just like we did it locally, we can also do it inside Kubernetes. So we this concludes the first part of the demo. So right now we did all of this containerization and deployment to Kubernetes portions manually by writing our own uh, Docker files and Kubernetes manifests. So let's come to the second part of the demo, which is about which is about doing everything using JKube. So first of all, I'll just delete these created manifests. Uh,
I'll tell one thing, Rohan. The fact that
okay.
you're writing a Kubernetes YAML live on a session is itself an achievement. So I'll not say anything else after that. So go
No,
ahead.
no, I'm
Go ahead with the
I,
demo.
I
Go
I
ahead.
haven't memorized it. It's
No,
I have
I know
it
you.
in
No,
front
I know
of
you have
me.
not memorized it. I know you have not memorized it. That speaks about your skill level. So go ahead with the demo. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot. I mean, uh, I have it in front of me, so I'm just watching and typing here. Anyway, so now we are done with this, the manual part. So I'm just going to remove the this manifest. We are not going to need that, and we are just going to remove the Docker file as well. We are not going to need that as well. So let's go to my IDE and install add the JKube plugin. I'll go
This
to
will
the
actually answer a very interesting question from the audience where they were asking that is the plugin Eclipse only because it's from the Eclipse Foundation. People
no
were
no no
asking
no
the question. It's
no
available for
no.
every single ID. Yes.
It's I mean it's not just applicable to IDE. You can use it from a
Even
terminal as
command
well.
line.
Yeah, I'm more inclined towards using everything from terminal. So right now, if you see, I'm using IntelliJ. I'm not using Eclipse. So it's under Eclipse Foundation. The project is under Eclipse Foundation, under Eclipse Cloud Tooling. We develop cloud tools. So it's under Eclipse Foundation doesn't mean that it only works for Eclipse projects. So it should be able to work with any standard Maven project. And okay, so let me add it. Group ID would be org.eclipse.jkube. Artifact ID would be Kubernetes mini plugin. And I'll pick the latest version, which is 1.1.1. All right. Okay, so let me just simply compile again, just to stay safe, and I'll show the Kubernetes name plugin in action. Mm, okay, uh, wait. Okay, so so we'll do the first portion, which is building the container image and pushing that to a container registry. So now that we have JKube installed in our plugin, we can simply do this stuff using ambient k-test build code. So it's going to create a Docker image for you. So I'm right now having access to Docker daemon, so it's going to talk to that Docker daemon and it's going to create an opinionated Docker image. So right now there is no configuration and we are simply providing the plugin. So the JKube is going to make some opinionated defaults. It picked the JKube's binary as, so it picked this as base image and it created the image with this name. And let's try to run the image that was created.
A question here, Rohan. The fact that JKube is giving its own image names. That's what I understand. But what about the part of checking into the container registry? All that can also be configured using, say, particular templates or particular values.
Yeah. So right now, we it's zero configuration mode. So we didn't provide any kind of configuration.
Hmm.
You can easily tweak what image you want to choose as a base image, what additional files you want to add to your container. You can easily configure it by providing your own Docker file or via the XML configuration I showed you earlier. So
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So I got it. So you're saying the Maven XML configuration, I can tweak it to make it as
yeah,
per the requirements.
yeah. So
Yeah, I remember this.
this
Yeah, there's this one. Yes, exactly.
yeah, this XML configuration can easily be extended to build any kind of
Hmm.
Docker
Yeah.
image or and copy anything to your
Okay.
Docker container.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
so you see we were able to create a Docker image and it seems to be running fine. So let's take a look at what JKube did here. So I'll just do tree target Docker. So JKube created this directory for you, and if you see, it created a Docker file for you. So I'll go to target Docker, Bangalore Chuck, GitHub app, build Docker file. So if you see, JKube created this as an opinionated, since we didn't provide any configuration, JKube decided something on its own and it created this Docker file for us. And it also created a tar file which it sent to Docker daemon for building the Docker image, which contained the jar inside. So uh, if you can see that JKube simplified your containerization part. So let's try to push this image to container registry like we did before, but using the Eclipse JKube's push code. So for that, I'll just do mvn test push. Okay, wait. First, so the image that we built right now, it's not in the Docker registry format. So ideally, images need to be registry, username, image name, and then tag. So right now, its username is Bangalore Jug, which is not my Docker Hub username. So I would need to tweak JKube to simply change the image name to what I'm looking for. So for that, I'll simply add a property here, uh, jcube.generator.name, and I'm going to add another way property docker.user, and I'll add my name here, and then I'll just use docker.user slash percent a colon percent l. So these are these percent a stands for the artifact ID and percent l simply stands for the latest tag. So let's try to build the image again. JKube is going to pick this property and it's going to build the image in the right format for us. I mean, here it is built. Alright, so it seems to have created the Docker image for us with the right format. So let's try to push this image. So for pushing the image to any container registry, uh, you can either do Docker login, or you can provide the registry credentials inside your plugin configuration. You can provide it here as well. You can provide uh, environment variable references in the plugin configuration. There's this auth config section. Or you can also provide these uh, credentials in the Maven settings. So we are as used to deploy to the Maven repositories by providing the credentials in Maven settings. So you can also provide your Docker credentials, Docker registry credentials in the settings, Maven settings.xml, and plugin is going to pick them and apply them, use them as well. So right now I'm just using the Docker logging. So let me try to push the application. Okay, it's pushing now. Hmm, okay, let's wait for it to finish. All right, so let's try to refresh our Docker Hub page, and let's see whether there was any kind of new image with the latest tag. Uh, okay, so JKube pushed this uh, image, and it was pushed a few seconds ago. So now you can see we were able to build the image, and we were able to push it to a container registry um, just by just running two simple Maven plugin goals. So right now it's all done using a Docker daemon, but you can also choose to not use Docker daemon and use the other build strategy provided by JKube. So let me try to. So now Docker daemon is not running. So JKube also provides an option to build container images without even needing any kind of Docker daemon using the jib build strategy. So I'm not sure whether you guys have heard about jib. It's a popular open source project by Google, and it allows to containerize Java application, and it's really impressive project. So Eclipse JKube leverages on jib for making the container image without even needing the Docker daemon. So in order to build the image without any daemon, I'll just switch the build strategy. By default, the build strategy is Docker. So I'll just select the build strategy to be jib, and it's going to build the container image for us. Container image is basically a tar file. So it's going to create the tar file for us. FHCV, the jib build was started, and it's now building. Okay, it even built the image for us. And let's try to push the image to Docker Hub again, but with JKube build strategy. Okay, so I'm pushing the image now. Okay, so now it has started the push to my container registry. Hmm. All right, let's check my Docker Hub. Uh, so I'll check the tags. The latest tag was pushed a few seconds ago. And as you can see here in the image layer section, it clearly says that we are using chip core, and which demonstrates that this was not used using Docker build strategy, but using chip. So you can see that I was able to build and push to a container registry without even needing any Docker daemon. So this use case is really handy when you are uh, automating you are doing all this stuff in CI/CD pipelines. You are pushing uh, the container image to some internal registry via some CD pipeline, or you are building image for CI for some integration tests. So it's really helpful use case. So now that we were able to build and push to container registry, let's try to generate Kubernetes manifests. Earlier, in first part of the demo, we had to write those manifests manually, but uh, for this, we'll just run the ambient creators resource code, and it's going to generate some opinionated uh, uh, Kubernetes manifests for us. But of course, they can be easily be configured. All right, so as you can see, so JKube has this concept of enrichers and generators. So these enrichers, they are a set of classes that are activated whenever we are issuing the resource code. They it, they process the final uh, Kubernetes generated manifest, and they add little things from themselves. So as you can see, we had this JKube controller, which added a controller resource, in this case, which is deployment, and it also added a service. It detected the ports, and it created a default service for us. So let's check to try to see what the plugin created for us. So I'll go to my target folder. I'll go to classes, meta-inf, JKube, OpenShift. Oh, it's showing OpenShift. Okay, it's okay. So I went to target classes meta-inf JKube Kubernetes, and I can see that it created a deployment manifest for me, and it also created a service manifest for me. So earlier you saw that I had to write all these things manually, but JKube made some opinionated defaults. It's also referencing the correct image, and it just added some additional things like some mode labels based on the project version, project group, and just added the default source management tags, and some additional environment variables, just some opinionated defaults, which makes it really easy to get started on Kubernetes. So again, the service, it's the same as the service we wrote earlier, but it has some additional annotations and additional labels. So, all right. So now that we have our manifest generated, let's try to apply those manifests. So instead of kubectl apply, I'll just run the ambient creators apply goal, which is going to simply create it in my Kubernetes cluster. Okay, it says that it's creating a service deployment. So let me check. Uh, Deployment service. Okay, let me check if there is any pod running. All right, so the pod seems to be running as well. So JKube seems to have deployed our application. So let's try to access this application. So right now, JKube created the application service with type cluster IP, which means that it's open to everything inside the node. So if I do minikube SSH, I'll access it inside the node, and I try to curl the application, I should be able to do it, but I won't be able to do it from outside. So right now this happened because JKube's default service type is cluster IP. So let's try to configure JKube to generate a service of type node port, just like we did in the manual Kubernetes deployment part. So for that, I'll just add a simple property in my pom.xml. jkube.enricher.jkube service. So enrichers are responsible for generating these manifests. So I'm just adding property for that. So enricher, which is responsible for the service, and I'm just going to configure the type to be node port. Okay. So I'll let me do get this resource, get this supply again, and it should update my service, and I should be able to see the updated service. So it's going to generate the manifests again, and it's going to apply the updated manifests to the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, it says it's updating, so let's check. Okay, so it created the service with type node port now. So let's try to access it. So my node's IP is on this. So let's try to ideally in um, ideal scenarios you won't be creating a node port service, but you would be exposing it through some other resource like ingress. But for the sake of demo, we are simply using node port service, and it seems to be working just fine. So you can see that with the help of JKube, we were able to automate all of our tasks related to Docker and Kubernetes. And uh, let's try to check the logs of our application. It also we can also check the logs. Now it's going to simply tail the logs of the application which is running inside the container. Okay, so it seems to be running okay. All right. So far we have seen build, resource, apply, log. So let's try to see the debug goal in action. So our application is now running inside Kubernetes, and now we want to debug it. So we have a goal for that as well. So for that, which you just need to do mv get-as debug. So you just issue the debug goal, and it's going to port forward the pods debug port to a local machine, and okay, it's adding the debug port. Okay, it's saying that you can start a remote debug session from your ID. So let me just go to my ID, and let me just add a, a remote debug session. So add remote, let's name it JKube debug, apply. Okay, I'll set a breakpoint here. So whenever we hit it, it should get here. Are we connected? Okay, it's connected now. So our debugging session is enabled. So let's try to hit the this. Let's try to hit this endpoint again and see whether the control gets here or not. So we'll open another terminal window. And you can see that we are here, and you can simply debug the application. This is a very simple one, so there is nothing here, but for complex applications you should be able to step through the lines and see what's wrong. So I'm just going to skip it for now, and this concludes the debug goal as well. So we your application is deployed, and once you are done with testing stuff, doing stuff, you might want to clean up. So if you check, it created all these things. So you might want to clean all these resources that are created. So for that, you might want to run the ambient creators undeploy goal. So it's going to remove everything that was created during the apply phase.
Uh, Rohan, so just a thought which came to my mind. If, say, hypothetically, you're building this environment for your CI environment and you're using JCube, so is there something which will completely break down the environment just like it built everything, apart from undeploy?
Mm,
I mean,
uh,
okay, just to give an example, you were manually deleted uh, the the Docker files, the Kubernetes configs, manifests. You manually deleted them when you were trying to clean up that earlier demo environment. Is
okay.
there something similar with JCube? The reason I'm asking the question is, see, a lot of times organizations create environments and they need to destroy them because they don't want to keep the infrastructure running.
Okay.
So, is there by any chance anything either as a feature request in the future where you can use it to, because you're effectively creating an environment using, say, 5 or 6 commands from scratch. So, developer doesn't have to go out of anywhere. It's right from the command line, everything is created from right from the code till the entire Kubernetes cluster. So, if you have something which will revert the entire state, that I think at least can be put in as a feature request for JQ. Just thinking of it.
Mm, uh,
Did you
okay.
get
Right
what I was
now,
did you understand what I was saying when I was that
not exactly. So Kubernetes had this thing called namespaces. So you can create a, for example, you are testing something. So you can create a test namespace. You can deploy all the stuff in that test namespace, and after you're done with it, you can simply delete the test namespace, and it's going to delete everything that was created inside that namespace. Is it something similar, or are you saying you want
yeah,
to create
okay,
clusters?
let's take a hypothetical example that I create an app, I create check it
Okay.
into a Docker file, and till the Docker registry, that's an activity which I'll do for every iterative release of that application. But after
Okay.
from one side, it's there in the image is there in the Docker registry. From there, when I take the Docker image, put it in the Kubernetes cluster, deploy it, run my integration tests. Now, once I've
Okay.
run it, I want to destroy that environment. Now, at the moment, it has to be done manually. Like you said, I can delete the namespace and everything on all the pods under that Kubernetes namespace will get removed. Is that something which JCube can do from its from the based on the the Maven sorry, not the Maven, the the plugin goals? Is there any such plan to have a plugin goal like that which will destroy the environment, just like right now there are plugin goals to create Docker images, create Kubernetes clusters? That's what I was trying to ask. Hope that makes the question
Okay.
a bit more clearer.
Right now, we don't have
Have it, yeah.
any goal for
Hmm.
destroying the Kubernetes. So if you see, JCube hasn't created any Kubernetes cluster. So the JCube plugins, they were written from a Java developer's perspective. You want to work on some Kubernetes cluster that is already being created by some cluster administrator, and he just gave you your cluster login credentials. You log into the cluster and you do your stuff. You deploy this application, and then you're done. But for creating clusters, we don't have any support right now.
Okay, yeah,
It's a bit
I
difficult.
got the point. I got the point. Sorry, I think I was going a bit ahead of the plan. No, no, bros. Thank you. Thanks for the inputs.
Okay, so okay, where was I?
Sorry to
So
interrupt you. My apologies.
no worries, no worries. Uh, I Okay, so I think I deployed the application to Kubernetes. I undeployed it. So we saw that how Kubernetes main plugin makes it easy to work with Kubernetes clusters. So let's take a quick look at the OpenShift, Red Hat OpenShift plugin too, to see how. So right now it's just a vanilla Kubernetes cluster. So let's take a look at. the JKube OpenShift plugin goal to see how it works. So I'll just uh, create an OpenShift cluster. Mm, so I'll launch an OpenShift cluster first. I'll log into the cluster, and then I'll try to debug and deploy the same application it to OpenShift. Mm, start. Okay. Uh, so OpenShift cluster is here. Let's try to copy the login command. Let me stop my Minikube cluster first. Type Sandbox and let me just do the login uh, and display token. So I'll just copy this login command and I'll log in into my OpenShift cluster. Okay, so I'm now logged into my OpenShift cluster, and I'll just do the same thing but with OpenShift, and I'll install the OpenShift plugin. Okay, so let's try to add some executions so that we are able to deploy the application with just one goal. So let's name the execution deploy execution, and it would be activated in the install phase, and we would run. I'm going to bind the resource and build goal whenever I run it. So now let's try to deploy the application. So for that, I'll just do -oc deploy. So it can be done with the Kubernetes plugin too. We just have to add these executions. So uh, it's going to. So the difference between OpenShift plugin and Kubernetes plugin is the build strategy. So OpenShift plugin uses the S2I build strategy, which is really helpful. It S2I stands for source to image, and it's really helpful for building reproducible Docker images. It produces ready to run images by injecting source into Docker image and assembling a new Docker image. So uh, it, as you can see, it started the OpenShift S2I build. So again, it's the same thing we did with the Kubernetes cluster, but OpenShift is more like an enterprise level Kubernetes distribution, just like you see with the Google Cloud Engine or Google Kubernetes Engine or Azure Kubernetes Service. So it's like any enterprise level Kubernetes cluster that you log in into a Kubernetes cluster, and you're simply deploying your application. It can be a staging Kubernetes cluster or production Kubernetes cluster. So it's building now. The S2I build has started, and it's gonna take some time. It's a bit slow as compared to plain Docker builds. Pods, let's okay, now it's deploying the application. Okay, why it didn't work? Oh no, I have to remove the default generator name. Uh, so I forgot to remove the default generate image name that's specific to the when pushing the image to Docker registry. But in case of OpenShift, we have this internal image registry, so image is pushed to that registry. So we don't need to provide this flag here.
You still provided a Docker username there. Should that also be removed as a part of your Maven configuration?
Oh yeah, yeah, let me remove that too. Yeah, thanks a lot for pointing it out. This is also not needed.
Yeah, lovely to
Um,
know.
so this plugin is just extending the Kubernetes plugin, but it has some additional features in case you are an OpenShift customer. So I'm not sure whether you guys have tried out OpenShift or not. So, but it's think of it as some enterprise level Kubernetes distribution that you log into your cluster, you run your JKube course, and you deploy the application. Since most of the people are using some Kubernetes distribution, since it's very difficult to use vanilla Kubernetes, set up vanilla Kubernetes on-prem. So yeah, I hope it works now.
So this source to image tool is a proprietary tool from Red Hat, right? In some that way.
I think in Red Hat everything is open source. I
No,
think.
what I mean by it's open source, not proprietary. I would rephrase when it's specific to the OpenShift container
Yeah, yeah,
platform.
yeah, you're right. It's specific to OpenShift, but it's open source. As you can see,
No, no,
it's
that no. Red Hat doesn't have anything which is proprietary. That's what I know. I was just thinking of the fact that that is why the plugins have to be maintained separately for Kubernetes and the OpenShift one,
yeah.
the JKube
So
plugins.
earlier we had this earlier we had this Fabricate Maven plugin, which
Hmm.
was just one plugin, and it created manifests for both Kubernetes and OpenShifts, and we were getting complaints from people who are using vanilla Kubernetes that they don't want OpenShift manifests. So we divided the
Hmm.
plugins into two
Hmm.
plugins. So one
Hmm.
can be used by our internal Red Hat projects, and one can be used by the community. So mm, okay, so the application is deployed to OpenShift, and so my pods are also running. So let's check the so OpenShift exposes your application by wrapping your service around routes. So it should be JKube creates a route automatically for you. So it should be the same stuff. Hello Bangalore Chuck. So this concludes the demo for OpenShift new plugin. I'll just simply clean up. I'll simply undeploy the application. Okay, it's cleaning up. So it deleted everything that was created. So I think I'll just log out. Uh, okay, so this concludes the demo. So I'll go back to my slides now. Uh, I just have one or two slides
If
left.
you can go on to share full screen, Rohan, that would be easier.
Okay, okay,
Uh,
okay,
yeah, that
okay.
would be great. Thank you.
So now that you saw the plugins in action, I really hope that you like the project, and I really hope that you try it out and provide some feedback. So here's are the next steps that we are. It's sort of a rough roadmap for us for the coming 6 months. So we are constantly asked about providing support for Gradle plugins, and we definitely have it in our plan. So we are going to provide Gradle plugins in upcoming 1.3.0 release. So I hope we are able to deliver on time, and we are also planning to add support for multi-layered Docker images. So right now we are only creating a single image level Docker image, but with in future we might be able to generate multi-layered Docker images like what Chip does or what the Spring Boot plugin is doing. I'm not sure whether you have tried out Spring Boot plugins buildable, but that also creates multi-layer build and Docker images. We are planning to support uh, build strategies for uh, some additional build strategies. Right now we have Docker Chip S2I. S2I is just for OpenShift, so we only have Docker Chip. But in future we would like to allow user to build a container image as per the uh, as per the build strategy he wants. He can use build packs, he can use something else, he can use podman, anything. So we are also planning to improve the helm support, so we are getting really good feedback from the community regarding our helm goals. So people are using helm goal to generate helm charts, but we are also planning to add support for publishing these helm charts to helm repositories. So these are these this is a rough roadmap for the coming 6 months, and you are always welcome to join us and provide us more suggestions, more feedback. Maybe your suggestion can also become a part of what we are going to do in future. So Eclipse JKube is an open source project, which means you can also join us and be a part of our community. You can, so we really appreciate contributors and users. I mean, any kind of feedback, any kind of help is always appreciated. Whether you are asking a question on Stack Overflow, you're creating GitHub issue, you are interacting with us on our GitHub channel for instant feedback. So everything is appreciated. So if you liked our presentation, I'll really appreciate if you try the project out and maybe become a part of the community, and let's build something nice together. So you can also subscribe to our mailing list if you all these things are applicable if you are interested. So we you can, if you want to try out JKube quickly, you can clone the repository and check out the quick starts that we have. We also have some courses on Katakora. If you like Katakora, you can try JKube out there as well. So this pretty much concludes my presentation. Thanks a lot again to all the Bangalore Chuck members and organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rohan. I have quite a few interesting questions. Probably can do one thing, Rohan. Can you go to the beginning of your slide so that it's a good, otherwise it looks a bit odd on the recordings. So do a full screen and we'll take the questions meanwhile. Great, thank you. Okay, so yeah, quite an interesting session. I'll start going through the questions one on one because there's been quite a few questions. So there was the first question which was there is from Nagendra sir, that would JKube make it easy for developers to handle the DevOps activities usually done by separate DevOps teams? I believe Nagendra sir, you're referring to the activities around the CI/CD pipelines, or is there anything else? You can unmute yourself and probably elaborate on your question. Nagendra sir is still there. Okay, looks like Nagendra sir is had to log off or something. So, anyways, okay. The next question was again whether it is available for other IDs or not. We have already addressed that. Uh, and to reiterate the information, Eclipse JKube is a Maven plugin. It can work in any Maven tooling ID of your choice, even from the command line. Okay. Moving on. Okay, this is another interesting question that does JKube has the potential to replace the entire Docker file or Kubernetes manifest file? So I would rephrase the question is that can JKube create a complete Docker file, even an opinionated Docker file using from the manifests or from the configurations in the Maven XML? Rohan?
Uh, so uh, JKube definitely is able to create a Docker files and manifest uh, by making some own opinionated defaults. So are you asking whether we are able to do it, or are you asking
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
XML
that was the question. The fact is that say if I have a opinionated view of a Docker file, I can completely do those configurations in JKube in the Maven plugin
Yeah,
definition,
yeah.
and it can do the complete
We
thing.
have a rich set of configuration. So I'll just show you the uh, some really involved configuration in. Sorry, I'll just show a very involved example that has really heavy use of XML for the, where is this? So I think it was this sample. No, it's not this sample. Wait. Um, Quarkus customized. Okay, maybe it was
Yeah,
this
the
one.
other copy customers as well.
So yeah,
Could
you
you
can
just
see here.
one second? Could you just enlarge your screen a bit more? It'll be easy for the
Okay, okay.
audience to read. Sorry for that. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, perfectly
So
fine.
if you see the we are providing a huge image configuration here. We are tweaking the base image, we are tweaking the tags, we are tweaking the environment variables, we are adding some additional files in the container image, and um, we are adding some additional directories in the container image. We are adding, so you can see we are doing all that using the XML configuration. So by using
Mm.
JKube's XML configuration, you should be able to. So in the end, this is going to create a Docker file, and which would be sent to Docker daemon in case it's a Docker build strategy. So I think you should be able to do it.
Yeah, perfectly fine. Thank you. Okay. We already saw the Eclipse, sorry, the GitHub request, which talks about the Gradle an enhancement is coming in the hopefully the next 6 months. So that answers one other question. I hope Sanjay, your question is answered about the relationship between Fabric 8 and JKube and what has happened. And Mark has been quite generous with sharing the history and everything else. Just one question, given that you already explained why you did a separate plugin for OpenShift and JKube, how what the feedback for the customers were. So what is the what is the long-term goal for Fabricate, since that you have now taken out some of the functionalities of Fabricate into JKube and also as separate plugins within JKube? So what is the future, or what is it looking at for Fabricate, or is it already like in the sunset phase kind of a thing?
So the main Fabricate platform, which was a platform as a service platform for doing CI/CD stuff for in Kubernetes, that is sandboxed. But now we have updated the Fabricate web page. That now the main platform, the platform which was earlier the Fabricate platform, that is sunset. But we have some subset projects that are really popular, and they are really liked by the community,
Mm-hmm.
and they would continue
Ah, okay, got it,
to
got it.
to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
maintained.
absolutely,
So
understood, understood. Yeah, so
so
I got
we
a point.
have
So
this.
okay, so yeah, yeah, now it makes sense. Got it.
So the projects are going to, some of the most liked projects for the community are going to
Hmm.
stay, and the main platform, we used to have our Jenkins pipelines, and we used to have lots of stuff that Fabricate provided, but all of that is sandboxed, and now
Yeah,
our bets are on things like
yeah,
Tecton and
yeah.
Trinity.
Yeah, true. I think this page explains the whole history and the next way forward for Fabricate quite well. Okay, there was a question from Venkatesh where do we have any tools which help us in developing Docker files? And Sanjay, as usual, has been generous with sharing his knowledge with the community. So thanks, Sanjay, once again. Um, okay. Okay. We already displayed Hemant how JKube can be used to create a Docker image and how it is pushed to Docker Hub. Uh, okay. There was another comment from Mark about that Maven K8's build is doing something similar to what Spring Boot build image does, but works with all popular frameworks, not only Spring. That's a very valid comment from Mark. The JKube K8's build is doing it for any framework. It's framework agnostic in that sense. Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to deploy any standard application which is not using any framework to. You can provide a
Exactly.
simple image configuration, just provide what kind of thing you want to run, and you should be good to go.
Great.
And JKube also works with Spring Boot 1 versions. This Spring Boot build code only works with versions that are newer on Spring, not with the old Spring version. So this is also a plus point.
Yeah. Okay. Biswa, yeah, the recording will be available later, so don't worry about it. Uh, okay, there was a particular question from okay, when you were showing the K8s deploy Maven command or the previous one, it was showing, was it showing the Kubernetes master as well in the output somewhere? There's a particular question from Vivek. I'm trying to recollect the screen vaguely, but I can't remember it now. Anyways, yeah, I
Okay.
think, but I think in one of the commands it showed maybe a K8s Kubernetes master. I can't remember it right now, Rohan. So yeah, it's there's no point getting go back to it.
I
Probably I
think
should.
I had done the kubectl cluster info in which we showed. Oh, sorry.
Maybe I can't remember it right now. Anyways, yeah, let's say.
So the
Vivek, if you want to highlight it, which where you were referring to this, you can unmute yourself and probably ask the question again. Vivek, are you there? Can't seem to find him there. Okay. If you're there, you can always obviously unmute yourself later and do it. Okay, there was quite a few interesting questions on how Fabric 8 was ahead of its time, which Sanjay was discussing, and I think yeah, to a certain extent, probably Fabric 8 was ahead of its time when it was being built. Um, okay, this is a very interesting one, and I know Mark could not remember these, but supposedly there's a tool which can show the what do you say, the appearance or rather the state of the cluster changing when you're running Chaos Monkey, which is another tool from Netflix on this thing. If anyone could remember that tool name, it would be worth mentioning it to the audience. Just to give a background of this, Chaos Monkey is a tool from Netflix, which is used to run uh, tests on production or production line environments to simulate what will happen when there's a serious problem in your production environment. So it Chaos Monkey just randomly goes out and turns down services, clusters, whatever you think of. So supposedly there's a visualization of when Chaos Monkey is at play in your environment, and there's a tool which can show that visualization. Oh, this cluster went down. Oh, this node went down. This pod went down. Supposedly there's some kind of a tool like that, or which is like a browser game. If anyone can remember the name, it would be worth sharing with the community here. Okay. What else can I think of? Yeah, Mark was quite clear in answering my question that when you use K8s undeploy, any resource created by JKube is effectively removed from the cluster. So that was quite helpful. There was a couple of questions from Namana and Venkaya about how JKube is helpful with the CI/CD pipelines, and Mark was again generous with explaining his how JKube helps with that. Just one question here from Shashi, which I think a bit interesting one, that uh, I think I'll let Rohan answer it. See, Kubernetes also has volume mounts and liveness probes and readiness probes, but those I think are not in the ambit of JKube because that's a part of how you're setting up the Kubernetes cluster. Is that right, Rohan?
Uh, yeah, that's our part of Kubernetes cluster, but you should be able to generate liveness and redness probes with JKube as well. So we
Okay.
provide this XML configuration. I think we do have XML configuration to support this. Uh, Let me try to find the docs. Uh,
Cool. That would be really
so
interesting if
we
you can.
really
Yeah.
have health checks for standard frameworks, and we add some default redness and liveness probes, which are really helpful. So I think you should be able to
Cool.
try it out.
That's great. Thanks a lot for that. So I hope that answers your question, Shashi. Okay. Okay. Let's. Okay. I think Mark would have answered this. So the question is like this. I'll just kind of merging a couple of questions. Say you do a change in your code, Rohan, and
Okay.
you have to now take it through the entire build and commit and deploy and test pipeline, whatever tool you're using. So in that entire end-to-end cycle, JKube becomes a very able ally for the Java developer because you just check in your code. Once it's checked in, you run the Maven, what do you say, Maven targets, and then it will do everything for you end to end, except for obviously the testing part, because that's outside of the ambit of JKube. Is that a fair, summarization, because the questions were all around, if we do a change to the app, do we need to create a new container, or deploy the app again and stuff like that.
Yeah, you would need to deploy the application again. We also have a goal called Kubernetes watch. So you run Kubernetes watch in the background, and whenever you do a compilation, whenever you do ambient package, so the watch goal is going to monitor your project workspace, and it's gonna monitor it for whatever the changes, and whenever it notices that the jar was modified, it's going to re-trigger a rebuild of the image, and it's going to redeploy your application on Kubernetes. So we do have support for, I mean, maybe something like this. So you might want to try it out to see whether
Yeah,
it's.
yeah, it makes sense. I think Mark also highlighted the same thing, that you can configure all the goals in your CI/CD pipeline, and then JKube can leave the most of the bulk of the work, hard work, to JKube to do everything for you. And he also mentioned the Kubernetes watch. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question, Namana. If you had anything else, you can obviously speak out, or address it. Uh, a couple of questions on Scaffold versus JKube, and again, Mark has been generous with his explanation. So just to give a background of Scaffold, Sanjay, would you like to elaborate on Scaffold a bit more, since you know it a bit better than I do?
Yeah, sorry. So scaffold is basically what we saw, but it's just a CLI tool rather than a Maven plugin or Maven dependency. So whatever JKube is doing using MVN commands like Maven plugins, scaffold can do most of the stuff, I guess. There's a CLI that you do. Then scaffold dev will just start your container while you're doing live changes. That's actually equivalent to MVN KTS watch, right? The plugin equivalent of watch. Then it also generates manifest, KTS manifest based on the configuration that you would provide scaffold to. Like there's a separate config file, like less number of configurations you do there, similar to what you saw in manifest where in the XML configuration sections.
Yeah.
So, but it's I guess it's similar, but that's a CLI, and this is more Java plugin specific.
And I think there's another aspect there, which is that you can change, you can do an opinionated way of doing. So right from your Docker image, you can have an opinionated Docker image and
Yeah.
opinionated Kubernetes configuration with JKube, which I'm not sure how much of it is capable in Scaffold, and also the lack of a dependency on kubectl or Docker for JKube, which is also
Yeah.
quite handy. And
Yeah.
again, all I'm just reading out Marx's comments, so I'm not saying this out of my own. I'm not an expert on JKube, just sharing it with the audience so that in case they don't have to go and read the whole chat. Okay.
So in scaffold also you can get away from having Docker locally. There's some remote options as well. You can do your builds in remote itself, like in remote Kubernetes cluster itself. So, but again, that it would take a lot of time because now you're connecting to a remote cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand scaffold. It's very popular tool, and it can. I've read some blog posts that in which we scaffold is used with chip together to build container images without even needing any Docker daemons. So it's really good, and I think it works for all the most of the languages, Golang, JavaScript, etc. JKube was created with uh, a vision, a strong focus towards Java developers. Since as Java developers, we don't really like using CLIs, and I mean, some people may like it, but some people might not like it. So maybe it's just a matter of personal preference. Some people might like Scaffold more, and some people might like JKube more. So I think it depends.
Okay. There was another question from on Sumant, I think, about adding custom Helm files like deployment and service configurations, and the fact that JKube can package the generated resources in Helm charts. And obviously, there's an enhancement coming for Helm in the future for example, the publishing the Helm chart. So that's coming in the future, Sumant. Okay. Next one, let's see. Okay, there was a question on Spring. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not getting this context here. Mark, would you like to add anything on top of whatever we have discussed so far? If you're still there on the call. Oh, no problem. No problem. Supposedly Mark has some challenge joining in live, so not an issue. Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the questions, Rohan. Any other question from anyone? Anything they felt like, a question is popping to the mind, given that, we have looked at JKube, how it is helping the Java developer handle the fact that, how do I create a Docker image? How do I do Kubernetes? Where do I deploy and all that stuff? Any other questions coming to the audience's mind? I really feel it's a very good session for our audience, given that we just, took our baby steps into the container world, understanding Docker's Kubernetes. So Rohan, just to give you a background, we had, I think, 3 sessions from Vivek from Microsoft, where he went into the Kubernetes 101, the Docker 101, and advanced concepts. So I think this was a very apt session, which built on top of it that, fine, now we know what Kubernetes can do. Now, okay, how do I use it? Because my organization wants me to do Kubernetes, but oh, it's too difficult, man. I have to write a manifest file, I do this, I do that. Well, here comes JKube, makes your life easy. And I really love that comment from Mark. It's like and I think he kind of saying that it's the way forward for Java developers. So we should kind of go ahead and spread the fact that JKube is way more easy than whatever I can offer in terms of, say, Scaffold or any other tooling of choice from it for an enterprise.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on this, that JKube was created with a strong focus towards Java developers. It's created for Java developers by Java developers. So I really hope that people like it and people try it out, and maybe our community grows in future.
Sure, absolutely. Anybody else, any other question, please? The floor is open.
Yeah, so I had one out. Suppose take an example. Nowadays we are using like a Jenkins or something like a build tool, and we are pushing image somewhere in the repository, and from there we are taking using JKube. The entire process is eliminating, right? Directly we are just creating an image from here, and directly we are deploying into the Kubernetes. So
yeah, with
if you want
JKube.
to,
No, yes, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, if the similar way we want to go with the production, we have to take example of dev UAT and prod. In the time, how we need to push this one into different environments.
All right, so you might so since it's a Maven plugin, it can be configured to be used in different profiles. You can either have a production profile, either have some staging profile, or so the plugin right now for checking the connection to your Kubernetes cluster, the plugin reads your kube config file. So it's just a matter of which Kubernetes cluster you're logged into. If you are trying to use JKube from some CD pipeline, so if you are logged into your production servers on that CD pipeline, JKube is going to deploy the application to the production server. And
Okay.
if it's a staging server, so it's just a matter of which uh, which uh, uh, Kubernetes cluster you're logged into. It also depends on what kind of service account you're using, whether that service account has access or not. So if you configure all this, I think you should be able to use JKube.
Those information we need to configure in our pom.xml, correct?
Yeah, you should. Which information?
Yeah. A different the prod server, EAT server, and all those information.
Yeah, so you can add the profiles, like I said, and but the plugin reads your kube config. So whenever you are logged into any Kubernetes cluster, a file is created called kube config on Linux. It contains the information regarding your connection to your Kubernetes cluster, your users, your sessions. So plugin reads this file. So if you're logged into production server, JKube is going to deploy to production. If you're logged into
Okay.
staging, it's going to deploy to staging server.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question, Vivek? If you would like to elaborate on your question earlier, I see that you are there on the call. Okay. Anyone else? Any other question?
Hi, this is Namana. Is it feasible for the monolithic architecture or it is only for the service architecture? Just say the old architecture which is using some SVN repo and which repo basically it is using internally.
What do you mean by repo?
Repository maybe some application will be using updated repositories like kind of a big bucket, something like that. And some of the application we developed by using monolithic architecture. It is not microservices. We need to make some changes in one part of the maybe for the overall application. It's monolithic architecture. So is this a feasible way to use it?
I'm sorry, Namana, your voice is breaking a bit, so I'll try to piece together what you said. I think Namana's question was this: that is, see that Namana's question was this: that is this is the JKube Maven plugins only a better fit for microservices, or it can be used for monolithic applications? Given that you can have the application deployed in any environment, you can have a microservice deployed in a Kubernetes environment, you can have a monolith deployed in a Kubernetes environment. So it is, I believe that it is not dependent on what kind of application you have, whether it's a monolith or a microservice. If you are trying to containerize it and deploy it in a container orchestration framework, JKube will help you with that. It is not dependent on it. The second part of a question was that what if you use a version control system like SVN instead of Git? Is there any dependency on that? I think there is no dependency on that because you can use any version control system, because Maven is a build tool which is agnostic of which version control system you're using to check out your code from. Please correct me, Rohan, anywhere where I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right. We don't have any dependency on the version control system. So I think I haven't really tried out other version control systems these days, but I think JKube should work just fine with Mercurial or SVN.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Namana? I'm sorry, your connection was a bit bad, so I tried to repiece your question from what I could hear.
Okay, yeah, I'll just check it out and I'll leave a message on that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. There were a couple of interesting questions around, it's a follow-up question to Narayana's question that how do you deploy to a particular cluster of Kubernetes, a particular environment cluster, say that I be a pre-prod or prod. So Mark was quite generous in saying that you can override the properties via command line. So Maven KTS build --d JKube and the versions, and you can modify some config, some config specific to a run environment. There's another question around, does JKube have, I think I remember Rohan clearly mentioning it, that JKube has support for ingress configuration. It is definitely there.
You should be, let me show you the ingress. So you should be able to generate ingress very easily via the XML config.
There was one interesting thing here. I know it's going up probably into an edge case, but what if you're not using Kubernetes for your traffic management? You go into a service mesh. Now that is, I think, a bit of a challenge. Sanjay is expecting a lot from JKube.
To be honest, I don't think we have support for that.
Istio, I know, yeah, because that would be opening it up a whole what do you say? It's a whole new world.
We do have an issue open from a user for the Istio support, but
not in the roadmap right now. Yeah.
Okay, it's marked in 1.2.0 milestone, but I doubt we would be able to do that.
Okay, let's say even 6 months or a year down the line, this feature request could be looked at a bit more seriously. Is that a fair guesstimate? right now, Rohan? I know you can't comment on it, so I'm not expecting something, but probably if there's enough traction from the community and also help, this might become a reality.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how our community takes off. So if people really push us to add support for it. So right now our everything is public. So we are purely open source guys, driven by the community. So if you push us, we are definitely going to add support for it.
No,
Or
and I
maybe,
would say not just push us, if you help us.
okay, if you help us, you can also become a part
That's why I
and you
said, no,
can also.
help us by contributing. Why push us only? Help us by contributing. You
Okay.
want the feature? Come. We are here, opening arms and welcoming you. Come and help us.
Yeah, so I think Istio support should be definitely be possible. So we have this extension, Java extension for Istio, which is based on, wait, slow drop. Okay, this is the one. So we have the Java model for Istio resources, which is based on Fabricate Kubernetes model. So we can reuse this, and we should be able to generate Istio artifacts and
Yeah,
provide some
Mark
kind of
also
integration.
mentioned that there was a Fabric 8 Maven plugin which supported sidecars, and it might have got inherited. So yeah, probably somewhere down the line might be a reality.
Okay.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. Sanjay always comes up with the best feature requests in our discussions. So thanks again, Sanjay. Anything else for anyone? Any other question? Any other question which was not answered to your satisfaction in the interaction we have had with Rohan so far? Any other question? Please, the floor is open, gentlemen and ladies. Anything else from anyone? Okay. So we'll give it another minute, and then if there's nothing else, we can close off the session. I'll use this a minute for
So,
this. Yeah. Yes,
Soik,
Narayana.
Rohan used some this one, right? OpenShift console. Is it like a open source or like a specific to Red Hat? You opened one Red Hat this one OpenShift environment while we are doing while he is doing testing something. Yeah. Uh,
I think it's not.
is
I'm
something like
not
that. Yeah.
sure. To be honest, I'm not sure whether it's open source. I think it must be open source since we are doing everything open source. So,
Or directly
so
I can open that OpenShift environment from browser.
yeah, if you're using OpenShift, you should be able to use the OpenShift environment from browser. So I think
No.
Red
My
Hat.
my question is suppose I want to some external user I want to create one this one cluster in OpenShift, so I don't have OpenShift environment. So
Yeah,
can
yeah,
I log?
yeah. So we have this. Red Hat offers this developer sandbox. So
Okay.
this allows you to create a test OpenShift environment. I just use that for, you can create an account on Red Hat Developer, and I think you should be able to launch a test OpenShift environment, which you can use for playing with Kubernetes, and uh, uh, it's I think it's completely free.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question from anyone? Okay. So next week we'll have a session from Satish, which will be, I think, on Spring security. I think, just one second. I'm trying to recollect. You'll anyways have the details by hopefully end of day today. We talk about advanced concept of Spring security. So the building blocks of Spring security architecture and how can we customize it to the requirements of the enterprise. So yeah, anything else from anyone? If there's nothing else, we can close out the session for now. Any other question from anyone? If they feel that there's some other question which came to their mind